Yo, what's going on guys, it's G-Miners here. Today, I'm going over what I think is hands down the best, most well-rounded, and easiest to use build in all of Destiny 2. This build works on every single character and subclass, and will also allow you to use whatever exotic you choose. I also made this build completely for the highest level endgame content. This includes Master Vogue, Master Grasp of Avarice, GM Nightfalls, and most importantly, contest mode for day 1 raids. A ton of other content creators make extremely great builds that allow you to absolutely dominate in PvE, but ultimately these builds require a lot of finesse and the ability to fully understand an encounter or activity. When you load up a raid on day 1 for the first time, builds like these are not going to be viable. They require too much setup and just don't have enough survivability. On top of this, some of these builds may not work if one or more of your abilities are on cooldown, and trying to get these builds to work will often take away from learning mechanics and developing strats. I think a lot of the builds that people have made for the community are great, and I'm not throwing shade at them, but I wanted to drive the point that there's a big difference between what works in the endgame versus what works in the base sandbox. So with that said, here is the best endgame build that is currently in the game. To get into things, this will require 3 set pieces of armor at specific affinities, which I will go over. On top of this, you will need another piece of armor that can possibly rotate between multiple affinities or have multiple pieces of armor, each with a different affinity. One of the mod types we'll be using will change based on your loadout, so you will need access to multiple different affinities. The final mod will not be affinity based, so affinity on the last piece of armor will not matter. To start off on this build, we will be using Taking Charge, which is non-affinity specific. This will allow us to gain stacks of Charged with Light by picking up Orbs of Power. In order to make getting Charged with Light more efficient, we will be using the Void mod Stacks on Stacks. This mod allows you to gain 2 stacks of Charged with Light every time you get charged. This consumes 4 mod slots, so I usually put this on my helmet as I don't use Ammo Finder mods too often. Because our stacks of Charged with Light will eventually cap at 2 stacks, we will be using the Solar mod Supercharged to raise this cap to 4 total stacks. Here, I run Supercharged on my gauntlets. This is because it consumes 5 mod slots, and I typically am only running Champion mods on my gauntlets, which cost 1 slot, so this is where I have the most room. We'll be using the Void mod Protective Light to actually consume our stacks of Charged with Light. With this mod, anytime you are charged and your shields are broken, meaning you are red bar or critical, all of your stacks will be consumed and you will gain 50% damage resistance. On top of this, for each stack of Charged with Light that is consumed when Protective Light is procced, you will gain an additional 5 seconds of this damage resistance. This means with 4 times Charged with Light, you will gain 20 seconds of damage resistance. The last mod I recommend you run is a mod of your choice that allows weapon kills to charge you with light. In the current season, I like to run Blast Radius to get charged with rapid grenade launcher kills, or Quick Charge to get charged with rapid fusion rifle kills. It is completely up to you what you run, but this is ultimately why I mentioned that you might need a piece of armor that can quickly be swapped to different affinities. Personally, when I swap between these 2 mods, I change the piece of armor that Taking Charge is on because it's non-affinity based. This allows me to run an extra solar and arc affinity piece of gear and never take them off. I simply swap where my mods are located. So with this full build set up, you might be wondering why we have 2 ways to get charged with light. The quick answer is it is not always safe in endgame activities to pick up orbs to get charged. When you generate orbs with masterworked weapons, these drop at the enemy's death location and not at your feet. This can make it extremely sketchy to grab these orbs, and oftentimes these orbs can land in unreachable places or even fall off the map. Using both of these perks allows you to consistently maintain high stacks of Charged with Light, and allows you to do it safely while playing under the power level of the activity. I mentioned that this works on any class with any exotic, and that is completely true. That being said, if you are playing on Warlock and your exotic slot is completely free, the Stag can help make this build even better. The Stag exotic helmet will provide you and your teammates with a miniature version of Protective Light while inside your rifts. This damage reduction is 25%, but you are also healing while it's applied. Also, whenever you are critical, your Protective Light will proc to protect you from death, all the while your Stag provides you with increased rift energy. This synergizes extremely well and provides you with the most survivability in the game. Before I showcase the build and go over how to use it, don't forget to drop a sub down below. Subbing is completely free, it helps me out a ton, and you can always change your mind later. As I mentioned earlier, this build is one of the easiest to use in the game. Here, I'm going to be using a special grenade launcher and fusion rifle to get charged with light, but once again, if you want to use mods that utilize different weapons, that's up to you. The deafening whisper I am using now has autoloading and hits extremely hard. I can easily shoot a ton of ads and quickly get up to ×4 charged with light. This also works on rank and file enemies when you are under power. Everything red bar should be a one-shot with this weapon, which is why I use it. On top of this, regular special GLs like Pardon Our Dust, Ignition Code, and Truth Teller will also work extremely well. You'll most likely be using these Day 1 Witch Queen to blind enemies, so these GLs will fit into the build extremely nicely. Since this season is also a huge fusion rifle meta, I like to use Null Composure. Null is a top tier weapon for this build because of the perk Reservoir Burst. By killing a single enemy, a chain explosion can happen, which will count as a multi-kill and give you multiple stacks of charge with light. This is also great because you can use your special on majors, ultras, and even bosses. I use this exact build to solo flawless the Grasp of Avarice dungeon. The build makes the game way too easy, and I was able to get the clear on my first legit try. I did want to mention before I end the video that you could potentially run a modified version of this build. This modified version could be without supercharged or a second way to get charged with light. In my opinion, however, there are not too many other mods that are going to be worth running. Elemental well mods revolve around picking elemental wells up. As I mentioned, this is not going to be safe to do in endgame content. Warmind cell mods also received a huge nerf. As of right now, the only mod I can see being useful is cellular suppression. Try this build out in Master Vogue or Grasp and let me know what you think. I'm always looking for feedback on how to make better builds and guides. Once again, don't forget to show the channel some love with a like and sub down below. Peace.